And before I hand it over to the town manager, I just want to thank our staff for showing up tonight. We appreciate it. I know this is your time. So again, this is like the third or fourth meeting we've asked you to come to. So we appreciate, again, coming out on behalf of the town of Enfield. Sir?
Thank you, sir. As most of you know, if I can't walk and use my hands, I would be mute when I present. So I will try and minimize that for our folks here at ETV. So this presentation mirrors very similarly the presentation that was given to council, as the mayor had said about a week and a half ago. And I'll just kind of cut right into the meat and sum up what we've got here. So we're going to start off with the Water Pollution Control Authority, the sewer plant. This chart right here demonstrates what are the regional sewer rates around our particular area. Enfield is right here. We're at $22 in change. That's our average monthly bill. The average annual bill is something slightly less than $300. This is what the rates currently are. And I want to demonstrate where we are with respect to those rates as we get into the next few slides. At present, this is the proposed budget is this column here, 2019. You'll note that there's slight growth here in the operations area, but larger growth here on the capital side of things. What we're reflecting in this particular budget, by and large, is consistent day-to-day operating expenses. We think we'll be able to maintain that, but we're adding 2 additional personnel. The reason we're adding those personnel is for a variety of reasons. The system is aging. We've got some maintenance items that we're delinquent on, just from the standpoint we haven't had the sufficient manpower to address those. And then we're also getting ready to do the facility upgrade. Capital, this is reflective of the situation outside the plant. The plant is scheduled for a $30 million upgrade in the very near future, but we have several lift stations that date back to the 70s that are continuing to demand maintenance. We've got hundreds of miles of system piping, the collection system itself that also needs maintenance, and that also requires repairs and reimbursements, repairs and renovations. So we've had a couple of road projects that have been delayed because the sewer beneath that road needs to be replaced. So we're looking to add some dollars in the capital fund to help expedite those repairs and keep our road projects on schedule. Graphically speaking, this is a representation. On your left is last year's expenses broken down by operating and capital. On the right is this year's projected expenses or proposed expenses broken down in the same way. And you'll see that largely, again, that has to do with this change in capital. So now in order to fund that, we are going to require a rate change, or at least we're going to recommend a rate change for, again, the fact that we've got the plant upgrades coming on. So it's $30 million. Most of that work will be done through a low-interest loan, so we have to pay that back. So we need to be able to generate revenues to begin repaying that particular group of loans. So what we are preparing, or what we're proposing at this point in time, is a 3% increase on the commodity charge, which is the rate at what you use. And then additionally, we're also proposing a $10, what we call ready-to-serve fee, a $10 monthly ready-to-serve fee. The ready-to-serve fee is effectively a flat rate that is designed to accommodate the capital needs of the system. So whether or not you flush your toilet 1 time a day or 100 times a day, the pipe through which that effluent flows, it costs the same to put in the ground no matter how often you use it. And so we need to be able to provide for some stable and fixed financing into the system to account for the repairs, the debt, and some other things that we have coming on. So this rate right here reflects where we would be with respect to that increase. So we would go from $22 a month to $32 and change per month, and we would move up in total compensation, or excuse me, in total bills to about $392. This rate change here is only reflective of Enfield's proposed increase. The rest of these rates in black remain consistent to what they are. We will update this chart as the towns around us continue to update their rates. So as you can see, even with the fee change, we're relatively, competitive with our surrounding communities. Several of the influencing factors that have gone into this, a few I've touched on, but if you'll recall, we're coming off of a 5-year rate freeze. We made some unanticipated rate modifications once the system moved from ad valorem or from tax funded to rate funded. We've had an increased demand for maintenance, as I've touched on, the accelerated equipment failure, the pending plant improvements, and a reduction in state aid. On to the general fund and general fund supported accounts. This is the broader scope. This is the biggest bulk of the budget. So moving into this area, I want to point this out. On the left is the regional tax rate, the regional mill rate for real and personal property. This is 29 town comparison in and around Hartford, and you'll note Enfield is down here, 24 on real property, and right here we're 26 on motor vehicle. And I want to point that out because when we compare ourselves service-wise to these same 29 towns, you'll note we're almost at the top of the list in almost all categories. We're looking at things like annual service hours at the library, the number of libraries that we operate, in this particular instance, police officers per capita. Right here, this is the Adult Day Center. Let's see, moving on over here. These are going to be hours of operations related to the senior center. This will be transfer, community resource centers, or family resource centers, excuse me. So as you can see, we're really fairly robust in the services we provide for that low tax rate. As we put together the budget for FY19, we put the budget together so that we could continue to fund the level of service that we have currently. I think it's the level of services that our residents have come to expect. So in this particular instance, this slide shows the amount of revenue coming in. This particular line is the line I want most people to pay attention to, and I think it's the most important indicator of the rest of this budget. This is a 22% reduction in the money that the town receives from the state of Connecticut. So this is the consequence of what's been going on in the State House over the last 18 months or so. And because of this, we're seeing a change right here in the line above it, the property tax, right? So we have to find a way to compensate for this loss of revenue from the state, which is a tad over $8.5 million. So this is graphically the representation of the revenue slide that I just showed you. On the left, this is 18, the current rate. On the right here, this is 19. This is what we're proposing. Excuse me. With respect to what we're including in the budget, on the expense side of the house, which is where we're moving to now, what we've done is we've concluded the continuation of our capital asset funding, which is utilizing financing, short-term financing for a vast majority of our purchases so that we can acquire more assets and value for fewer dollars today. Staff is recommending to council the creation of sinking funds. So sinking funds, unlike capital non-reoccurring or CIP, capital non-reoccurring is the technical account, and when we place items in this account, they're funded for a 3-year period. And once we either decide we don't want to use the money, we can easily move it from, let's call it doors, and we can move that money up to windows. But if we decide not to use that money, or if we don't use all of the money for that purpose, the money in the capital non-reoccurring is returned to the general fund for reallocation after that 3-year period. In the sinking fund, the way that this works is it's more of the fund itself is defined. It's separate from the general fund. The money moves from the general fund into the sinking fund, and so we would call it the Board of Education Facilities Fund. And that fund would be able to pay for doors and windows and roofs and floors and walls. And if the bill comes today and we need to replace all the doors, we just simply replace the doors. We don't have to worry about how many dollars are specifically allocated in the capital non-reoccurring door Board of Education line item. So the versatility of the money is greater but the defined scope of the use still exists because these funds are established legislatively by ordinance. So there's a very high requirement, there's a very high threshold for public notification and public comment with respect to the creation of these funds. They are accounted for separately away from the general fund, so residents and citizens can go and easily see where this money has gone and where this money is going. And also, because these funds are created by ordinance, when they are no longer necessary or when council deems them no longer appropriate, they also have to be dissolved via legislative action. So there has to be another public hearing, and there has to be more publication and more notice so the public has the opportunity to come forward and comment before those funds can be dissolved and the dollars returned to the general fund. And then lastly, we've included in this particular budget an operational consolidation. We're moving the senior center and the recreation center under the oversight of the director of libraries. This is a first step in a broader plan to develop what we would like to call the Department of Leisure Services, or the Department of Library and Leisure Services. The goal here is that a lot of these particular operations, they have a lot of similarities between them. So there's a lot of programming, there's a lot of community outreach, and in some way they touch all aspects of end users for recreation. So whether or not it's the older folks or whether or not it's the younger folks, there's an ability to tie in. And so rather than continue to keep our programming staff, our recreational programming staff siloed, we think that this is a good opportunity to bring them all together and expand the portfolio of services that we can offer, and to do so in a cost-effective way. So that's what we're going to have included in the budget. Some other notable expenses on the capital side. We've got almost $700,000 in vehicles and equipment. We've got to make sure that our police officers are able to respond to crime in safe, active, and reliable equipment. We need to make sure that our snowplow drivers can push snow in safe, reliable equipment. So we've got money budgeted for that. Again, we talked about the sinking funds, so $250,000 for the town of Enfield sinking funds for us to deal with our various building issues. $650,000 for the Board of Education sinking fund for its facilities, as well as abating the PCBs, the first round of PCB abatement over at JFK Middle School. Then there's also $625,000 in various public infrastructure that's in the CIP. So this is everything from funding the sinking fund there to roads improvement support, such as transfers in to the roads fund, as well as sidewalk work and some other things. And then last but not least, we've included $125,000 for facilities master plan. What most people don't know is that we are actually the third largest owner of facility space in town, and then we are behind the Department of Corrections and Win Stanley's portfolio. We own approximately 1.4 million square feet of building space. Those buildings sit on roughly 515 acres of land, and that excludes all of our parks and right-of-ways. And those are expensive to maintain. Our estimate to upgrade all of those facilities, most of which date back to the 50s, exceeds $100 million. So we need to begin looking at how to downsize our facility footprint, so that is included in the capital budget as well. To the expense lines themselves, what we're proposing is a flat budget for education. The school superintendent and the school board had originally submitted a budget proposal that included a 1.8% increase. I am proposing a zero growth in that particular account for those particular expenses. Salaries, we did grow a little bit, just 1%, but you'll also note that in all other expenses related to operations and our benefits package, we're actually decreasing our expenses. So we've done a very good job from all levels of the organization to manage those discretionary expenses that are within our control. We did see debt growth. Most of this growth in particular is the result of transitioning financing for roads and the Enfield High School project from temporary short-term financing to long-term fixed financing. And again, there is also the capital improvement budget that I referenced just a few slides ago. So those are factors that are all contributing to that particular line item. So again, graphically represented, last year, 2018, is on the left. The proposed 2019 expense budget is on the right. Now, to make all that happen, we need to generate some revenue. And the way that we need to do that in this particular instance is we're recommending a mill increase of 3.54 mills. This is not a number that we were particularly thrilled to put forward, but it is in response to the shortfall of revenue that is headed our way from the debacle of the state economy and the state funding to the local jurisdictions. So this chart here is a graphic representation of the mill rate over time. This right here represents the last fiscal year before the height of the housing boom, if you will. And I'd like to point out that right here in 2019, almost 13 years later, the mill rate is still lower than what it was 13 years ago. Now, I know that that's not much consolidation, but I'd also like to point out that property values have continued to decline since the height of the housing boom. So I think that really speaks to this organization and what this organization has done to maintain its expenses, to try and accommodate and be accountable to the citizens and to the council with the decisions it's making with the tax dollars that are available. So again, as I just referenced, the influencing factors with respect to the millage rate, by and large, is the decrease in intergovernmental revenue, almost 8.8 million, I think, is the actual number, in decreased revenues from the state. We've got the increased debt and capital, and then we also have the deferred assets that we need to replace, and those are the cruisers, the snow plows, EMS vehicles, those types of things. So that is the budget in a nutshell, reflecting the proposed millage rate. These are, again, the charts that you saw at the beginning, which reflect our millage rate relative to our neighbors in the area, the 29 towns that we compare ourselves to in the Metro Hartford area. And you'll notice, again, on property, we've come from the bottom to the middle of the pack. And on the motor vehicle side, we do rise a little bit to the top. But again, these transitions are to maintain these positions with respect to the services that we're able to provide our citizens. So that, in summary, represents where we are with our budget. We are right here, Wednesday, April 25th, at the community conversation. So we have a few dates left. I would like to note that this date here, Thursday, May 3rd, there was some communication today between the acting chair of the Board of Education as well as the mayor, and it was determined that with these two particular dates so close together, this BOE Town Council workshop would not be necessary. So I do want to bring to everyone's attention that this particular date, this meeting, has been canceled as of today. So there is still time left to participate in the process. Council is set to have one more budget presentation. It's the administrative portion of the budget that is tomorrow at Town Hall in the Enfield Room. Council deliberations on this proposed budget begin, I believe it is Tuesday, May 8th, I think is the date. So that's not too far away. And our deadline to adopt is Monday the 21st. So that is the 2019 budget as proposed by myself, as supported by staff. So I want to thank them for their work. And at this point in time, we are more than happy, sir, to answer any questions or concerns that any members of council or the community might have.
Appreciate it. Would anyone like to ask any questions from the audience? If so, we're going to put you right on the spot in the middle, so don't be afraid. Anyone like to ask any questions? Go ahead. Wendy, go right ahead. Oh, go right ahead. Yep. Well, I think we're only going to allow you to have one because there's so many people waiting to talk. No, go ahead. Ask as many as you want. Go ahead.
Wendy Costa, 49 Steel Road. I'm not sure exactly the process here, so I guess my first question is, Is the purpose of this meeting and next week's meeting just to get the public's opinion about what's been presented, and then your deliberations with each of the departments will go after that?
Correct.
Okay, so I first of all want to say thanks to the council for the past few years for keeping our mill rate where it has been. I do think that trying to be top tier in service levels and low cost provider is doomed to fail sooner or later. It's going to catch up to you, and I think that we're at that point. I think we've been dealt an awful blow by the state of Connecticut, but that being said, we have to play with the cards we've been dealt. And I think it's time that the council needs to really stop and think about, do we want to still be top tier in services and move into top tier with a mill rate, or do we want to scale back some of our services? But I do have a couple specific questions. So on operational consolidation for the Department of Leisure, and I would recommend changing that name because we don't want anybody thinking that people heading that department are sitting around with their feet up. Were there any savings incorporated into the budget as a result of the Department of Leisure consolidation?
20,000? So between potential $15,000 to $30,000.
Okay. I'm in favor of the sinking fund concept, but my question would be, if we didn't do that, would we just merely have to add those items back into somebody's budget somewhere in a more specific doors versus windows as opposed to a general sinking fund?
Great question, and Brian, I'll answer it. If I misspeak, please let me know. So the point of that is exactly right, to give us some flexibility to start addressing some of the issues, roofs, doors, something of those nature, where we're not constantly having to go out to referendum and ask folks, for X amount of dollars, because the charter is very specific. We can't spend more, roughly, I think it's about $660,000, within our budget, or it has to go to referendum. And to your point, the point of that is to give us some flexibility to start some projects where we may not be able to finish them all in one fell swoop, but we can start them and continue to have that fund, what we want, properly funded, for lack of a better phrase, so we can finish some projects, and we're not going to constantly have to go out and ask taxpayers for referendum. It also allows us to use a little bit smartly of the fund balance without just using fund balance to pay bills, which, to your point earlier, that's why the state is in the position that it is.
Is 0% increase in the education budget reasonable and realistic? I don't have children in the school system, so I can't speak to anything about the school system, but I hate to be sending a message that we think our children are important, but I also don't know anything about their budget, so I just raised that as a question to be thought about. And my last question has to do with the line called debt and capital. What does the capital schedule look like from, 2 years ago till the next however many years that it's played out? Because don't even have the faintest idea how long it takes us to pay for these things. And do we look at that every time we make a decision to spend more money on either a new school or roads or whatever? Do we consider what we've now done to the mill rate for the next 5 or 10 years or whatever? And I'd like to see that debt versus capital broken out for many years so that we know what it is we're looking at, because it is true that what we've already spent we can't change, but maybe we need to modify our behavior going forward about how we do that.
Again, not to put the manager in a spot, we were actually working on a debt service presentation through this process. I don't want. When do we think? Yeah. Yeah.
The debt schedule, with respect to the larger projects, the roads and the schools and whatnot, the permanent financing is a project. The schedule of permanent financing is on my desk as a project to be done. It's my intent to have it for the public hearing, part of the final presentation that will be made on this budget in about a week and a half. So it's rather complicated, but the goal is to ensure that folks like you who have the question, how much more debt can we add and when can we add it, is to help answer that question so that once, as a community, we set the total debt limits, let's say we don't want to pay any more than 4 mils towards debt, we'll know that in, like for instance, I think it's next year, we could add $10 million worth of debt and not have to increase the mill rate to cover that. So we are working to get that information together. It's presented in a couple of different ways in our organization, but it's not one that's easily obtainable, but it is one we're working to present. So.
Thank you, sir. And Wendy, just asked to answer your Board of Ed question. Town manager and the superintendent have been working together very closely, as has the council and the board. And so I don't want to sit here and say that obviously a flat budget is what they would love to have. I think just from some perspective, as you know, we got cut $2.3 million in November by the governor, which no one expected. And so the council, again, understanding how the board's budget works, we sort of absorb that for this fiscal year. And so as we go forward, would we like to be able to give them more in the flat budget? Yes, but to some of the things Brian has shown you, again, we're trying to be fair across all sectors of town as best we can. Yep.
I see we have a couple of board members here today. Should we comment on what you're expecting on the board side? Because we don't know. We really haven't heard yet on how it's going to affect the Board of Education. Again, that goes with top-tier services for funding and are we funding the school as top-tier services?
So you want to know what a zero will do to the Board of Education? No, that's okay. I can tell you that the superintendent and the assistant superintendent are currently trying to come up with ideas right now to get us to the zero. I know that there is a lot of unknowns that we have, like we do not know how much correct tuition we're going to have to pay out this year. Retirements are still in the air, so we don't know how much money we're going to save on that. We don't know how much we're going to get back from cost-sharing grants for special education. So those are all variables that we don't know the answer to yet. So I'm not sure how pretty it's going to be, but we are trying to preserve all of our educators and staff as best as we can.
Hold on. You have to take the mic.
So one more, if I may, and to the town manager with our workshop. So when will we find out exactly where we lie now in the school department's budget?
So the question is, when will we know whether or not the school will be able to make the number that we've proposed? I don't know. I don't know that they'll be able to confirm that they can meet that number prior to the adoption of the budget.
Prior to the adoption of the budget, we won't know?
I don't know that he'll be able to identify the full scope. Just, for instance, it's quite possible that council could direct, say, a hard mill increase. And they could say, so on May 8th or 12th or whatever the date is, you could say, Brian, we don't want to see the mill increase beyond 3. I have no idea how I would make that work when you give me that direction, but I would find a way to make it work between whatever date you gave me that objective and whenever that, May 21st. So in this proposed budget, I'm not asking the superintendent to do anything more or anything less than would be required of me to be responsive to your direction. So he too might have to make hard choices somewhere along the way in June or September or wherever is most appropriate. He might just have to cross his fingers, and the school board might have to cross their fingers and hope that somewhere along the way they're going to get a break or two, because we're going to have to do the same. I mean, we adopt the budget based on an assumption of facts, right, or on an assumption of situational items, and we have to hope that those happen. But if they don't happen, then we have to respond in whatever condition that is.
To me, that's totally different, because when we adopt our town budget, other than revenue and some unknowns, we know what services we're going to give. We know if we're going to have any reduction in staff. We know how many pencils we can buy, and I can't vote on a budget without knowing that from the Board of Education. That's highly unusual for us not to have the numbers from the school board on what they predict they're going to get out of their budget. That's all news to me today.
So, and I'm sorry that that's your response, but last year was a prime example. We adopted our budget with a certain set of assumptions based on the information that we had at that time, and that fell greatly off the cliff. And we did reduce services to a great degree. We did have to amend several services that we provide halfway through the middle of the budget. It wasn't because we chose to do it. It wasn't because we just felt like it. We had to do it to be responsive to the environment because our assumptions changed. In this particular instance, the superintendent, I have been forward with the superintendent from early on about the fact that no matter what he was able to propose, I was not confident that we would be able to meet any other funding level than the fiscal year 2018 number. So the superintendent has been aware of that concern. He's been aware of that target number, and I recognize that he has factors that he has to consider. So we're doing our best to be as upfront as we can, but unfortunately, at this point, I don't have an accurate set of data to make accurate predictions going forward based on what's happened last year. So we're going with the best series of data we think exists, but I can't guarantee that what we adopt today, what you adopt, in 3 weeks is going to be the budget we're going to finish under, 15 months from now.
Okay, so, we got a mid-year reduction from the state, which was unpredictable. When we pass the school budget again, every year when we pass the school budget, at least we know where they assume they will be. Unlike this year when they asked for 1.8, and then if we reduce that 1.8, they would come back and say this is where the reductions are going to be found. I'm not getting that end result this year. So that's just my concern. I don't want to go too back and forth with it. Thank you.
Anyone else like to ask any questions of the budget? Ray. How you doing, Ray?
Doing okay, Michael. How are you? First of all, I just wanted, before I make my statements and ask a question, is thank you. You guys got a tough row to hoe. I'm very happy that Mike's leading the charge because we have similar backgrounds with multiple $100 million budgets. So you got a good team. As long as you guys stay together, we can get through this very delicate time. And it is delicate. You're going to make choice. You're going to make decisions, and you guys are going to get groused out like you wouldn't believe. I know I went through it on the board when we tried to set ourselves up for this year. And I'm going to tell you, teachers' impact would be larger than it would be if we hadn't made the decisions we made in 2017, the spring of 2017, and we'd be really struggling in the school system. Our school system is not a top-tier school system. It's not a top-tier service, Tom. We're struggling to get there. And it's projecting in the right direction. At least it was when I left last year. So I got a couple things. One, Brian, when you talked about sinking funds, you said you had a $650,000 BOE sinking fund. Well, it kind of makes it sound like the BOE has control over that. They do not. It's the town. So I would appreciate if you change that slide to school system facilities, please. As far as the facilities we have, I know there's efforts to consolidate our footprint. I'd like to know what it is now, its current state, and I'd like to know what you're targeting for your future state, because that's going to be a significant savings in annual maintenance costs. And if we could sell some of that property, get it back on the grand list, I think that would be good. The last thing is a plea. Please do not overdip into the fund balance. That will hurt town of Enfield in the medium and the long term. I know it's easy. We've got a savings account. Let's go at it, and we can sit there and save our services. We got services that might be in excess, and we need to take a look at that. Do we have services that need to be outsourced to save the service and still provide our residents with the services that they need? I have a gut feeling, because I haven't had conversations with anybody, that that's what's going on right now. So, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. You're all volunteers, and you all are under siege. I get that. And good luck.
I guess I have two comments. I mean, this past budget, the cuts that came from the state, a lot of them were on the Board of Ed side, and that was held harmless. And that was not easy for the town to do. And there's one more thing that I'd like Brian to look at when he looks at debt service. Debt service is a two-edged sword. When you don't do things that need to be done in a level, conscientious manner, you not only have debt service, you have what I call the tsunami of deferred maintenance and major repairs. And although you don't see it in the debt service, it needs to be accounted for in order to see the full picture of the town. Because as you go forward, eventually that debt will come to roost, that it has to be done. So when we're looking at that, please, the other prong in the fork needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public would like to speak? For the first time? For the second time? Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? I'd just like to thank our Board of Ed members, Charlotte Riley, Chris Rutledge for being here and answering the questions, so thank you. I'd like to thank all our staff. Again, Brian, great job. And thank you all for coming tonight. I'd like to thank the entire town council for being here. Unless we have any other questions, do I have a motion to adjourn? Councilor Denny, seconded by Councilor Falk. All those in favor? Thank you, everyone.